May the words that are heard be thine and not mine. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. From our gospel reading, Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." Many of you, I am sure, are aware that a replica of the Vietnam Wall Memorial has been on display in downtown Huntsville this weekend. The memorial is a striking, chilling reminder of the conflict that war was in our nation. As a child growing up in the 70s, we were very much aware of Vietnam and the seemingly different attitude concerning that war than other perceived more patriotic military efforts of our past. This is entirely unfortunate and not completely dissimilar to what some of our soldiers encounter upon returning home after active and honorable service today. One aspect of the consciousness concerning the Vietnam era was the uncertainty surrounding the war, or the military's very much politically interfered objective. What was the end goal? All the while, our soldiers were facing a new and difficult mode of warfare, guerrilla in nature. At times, it appeared that all bets were off. The least you might say was that this engagement, police action or war, was unconventional. The response to this by the American public was fear and distrust, most likely some of the intention of our adversary's strategy. This manifested itself in many ways, one of which was the unknown and scary reality of POWs and MIAs. The thought of being captured was horrifying, and the accounts of torture or being lost and forgotten were staggering. One of our more recognizable POW figures was Senator John McCain, now clad and white-robed as a member of and in communion with the saints, who by his physical impairments was a living manifestation of those aforementioned fears. The phenomenon of fright was not exclusive in the 70s to Vietnam. You may remember the hostage crisis of Iran, or terrorist hijackings of planes. Terrorism remains a motivator of angst. I remember one of the freed hostages from the embassy in Iran commenting that the hardest component of their experience was the uncertainty, not knowing how long it would last and having no ability to affect their outcome. They didn't know if or when they would be freed. Their captivity indefinite. The thought of this illustration seems relevant when we read the wisdom of Solomon this morning, referencing the souls of the righteous are now in the hand of God, and no torment will ever touch them. I recall as a little boy having anxiety regarding the Vietnam War, even long after its conclusion. I wondered, often prayed, that God would create a place where we all could be safe. I was too young to understand the draft process or conscription into military service. I feared that my father or oldest brother would be ushered away at a moment's notice to the horrible place where war happens. My father's footlocker from his term of service with the Army was kept in the basement. As a source of solace, I would look for it each day when I returned home from school, thinking that if he was called, that he would need take it with him. The sound of the garage door opening in the early evening, announcing Dad's return, was relieving. Childish fears, right? But how many of us live with anxieties and phobias as a norm and a constant in our lives? I have lived with anxiety for most of my adult life. Constantly wishing, praying for a safe place for ourselves and our loved ones. A place like the one that's described in our New Testament reading in Revelation. In our gospel reading this morning, we read of a different sort or account of despair. Jesus' deep friend Lazarus has died, and he has come to console the family. But he could have come sooner. And if he did, the belief was that Lazarus would not have died. Earlier in John's account of the events, Jesus is said to have tarried and not rushed to Bethany upon hearing the news of Lazarus' illnesses. The implication seemed purposeful. Yet their assumptions and accusations cut him deeply. The realization of this perception caused him to weep. Yes, the loss of his friend saddened him, but Jesus already knew the rest of the story. He knew of Lazarus' faith and the promise that it would yield. He knew of his eternal hope and that he could be raised even now from the tomb. Jesus wept because of their unbelief. Maybe even then he was realizing that they not only misunderstood his messianic purpose, but that it would require his own rising from a tomb for them to finally grasp it. He, like our soldiers, misunderstood after honorable duty and service. So he asked, "Where have you buried him?" Went to the grave and called him forth. I imagine Lazarus had no idea of how long he had been dead or if there would ever be any intercession on his behalf. He was like a hostage to death. Lazarus knew something about death or not being safe. Wrapped in traditional cloths used to prepare the dead for burial and then stashed into a cave with the stone rolled in front. It's echoing of Easter. Man, it would have been interesting to sit down and have a couple of beers with Lazarus, don't you think? What a story. Have you ever stopped to think that Lazarus died again? He's not alive today. They buried him again, probably in the same grave. Despite the incredible grace that he had experienced, he could not escape the captivity or move from underneath the shroud of death. Death still won. Oh, but dear ones, death doesn't win. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him." Death doesn't have the final say. The work that Jesus completed while here on earth ensures that we and Lazarus and POWs and hostages and any who carry the burden of anxiety or fear and all who have gone before us, by the nature of your baptism and through our conversion, we are free. Free from our captivity. The binds that imprison are loosed. Even though our physical bodies may fail, we are free. It's why we adorn white for All Saints' Day. It's a resurrection service. It's an Easter service. John's account also includes Martha's great confession that Jesus was the Messiah. He responded that he was the resurrection and the life. Due to that revelation, we know with confidence that our beloved friends and neighbors and family members, Brian, they all live and are here with us, kneeling beside us in communion. Christ has wiped away every tear, even his own. Death will be no more. You are unbound. You are unbound. Amen.